Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. To me and many others, tone is the number one thing when playing the saxophone and really any instrument. If you have a bad sound, nothing you play will sound any good. Last week I made a video about how to actually practice long tones, and you can use that in your practicing to not waste time and get a much better sound on the saxophone. So if you haven't checked that one out yet, I highly encourage you to go do that. This video, however, is about one specific exercise that's pretty simple, but it will definitely improve your sound. I created a PDF worksheet that has the exercise written out in all 12 keys, and you can get that for free by clicking the link at the top of the description down below, and I'll also put that link in the pinned comment. So what is this simple exercise? Well, I'm actually going to jump inside that worksheet now and show you and demonstrate it for you. All right, so as you see, I'm here inside of the PDF, and what you notice is I wrote it out in all 12 keys, but going up by half steps, starting at the bottom of the saxophone. So you can do this on any instrument, but I play saxophone, so I wrote it out for saxophone. It doesn't matter if you're playing soprano, alto, tenor, bari, whatever. It's just in whatever key of the saxophone that you're playing, so don't worry about transposing or anything like that. If you look through the exercise, it's basically a major triad. So we have the major triad here, the 1, 3, 5, and then the root in root position. And then you notice we do first inversion. So it's the 3, 5, 1, 3. Then we have second inversion, 5, 1, 3, 5, and then finally root position again, an octave up. Then we go down the exact same way. We basically repeat what we just played, but in reverse, going down, root position, second inversion, first inversion, finally root position, holding it out. Great, that's what it is. Why is it useful to improve your sound? Well, just like in that last video I talked about long tones, one of the things that you need to do when playing the saxophone or any instrument is find your tendencies. I'm not going to get into that again. But once you know where each note lays on your instrument, then it's about moving around and being able to confidently jump from one note to the next, knowing how to adjust with your embouchure, your air, and all of that, so all the notes work properly. It's not just set your embouchure one time and wiggle your fingers and hope it plays in tune and plays with a good sound. That's not going to work. Arpeggios are great for this, for practicing your tone, your intonation in the whole range of the instrument, because you're not just playing linearly. You're not just going up stepwise, playing major scales or chromatic scale or something like that. So you can use minor arpeggios, whatever. I just like major keys, so I picked a major arpeggio. But the point of the exercise is we're playing up the instrument, but because we keep inverting that triad, root position, first inversion, second inversion, root position, we're constantly going up, jumping down, going up, jumping down, like we're shifting gears through a car, going up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then same way on the way down. Why will this help your sound? Why will this make you sound better on the instrument? Well, if you're doing it properly, which I'm going to show you in a second, you're going to be able to have the proper embouchure to adjust as you go through. You're going to have the correct amount of air to support the tone and play in tune. And you're going to be able to get around the entire range of the instrument with a good sound if you're listening properly. So what I'm going to do now is demonstrate the very first one here. So it's starting on my low B flat, going up 2 octaves here to the B flat with the octave key. Check it out. Okay, so that's what it sounds like when you actually play it at a moderate tempo. That's actually not as slow as I'm going to want you to play it, and not as fast as you can play it, somewhere in the middle there. What should you be thinking about when doing this exercise to get the most out of it? Because sure, you could do this. Right, and obviously that's not good. Even if you do the correct notes in the correct order, even in time, you're not getting the most out of it. So one, you want to go slow enough where in the beginning you can look at a tuner while you're practicing it and every single note stays in tune. I'm not going to talk about just holding one note for a long time. Remember, I did that in the last video about long tones. Go check it out if you haven't. As you're moving between these notes and you're going from low B flat up to D, you're looking at the tuner each time, and what's happening when you switch? Is the beginning of every note flat? Is the beginning of every note sharp? Are some notes sharp, some notes flat? That's for you to use the tuner as a tool to check yourself and then be able to adjust as necessary. The next thing you want to listen for is the evenness of your tone. Now, is every single note on the saxophone supposed to sound exactly the same, like a MIDI sound? No. The character of the saxophone is really cool because all the notes don't sound exactly the same. But if you have like a really bright low B flat that's really, strong and screams out there with the brassy sound, then D is really dark, and then F jumps out, it's going to be inconsistent. And then when you're playing through actual songs or improvising or something, your tone isn't going to be pleasant to listen to because it's going to be so inconsistent throughout the range of the instrument. So really focus on keeping each note with a consistent tone. So if you hear certain notes jump out more than others, think about why that's happening. Is it the instrument? Is it you? You have to kind of, work on that and say, okay, my middle B flat for some reason isn't, is way darker or stuffier than all the other notes. Let me check the keys. Let me check the pads. Let me check to see if I'm doing something different, and then go from there. The next thing you want to think about are the dynamics. I want you to try to play an even dynamic level throughout. I do something called line dynamics. That's really where the line goes up, higher in the range, you get a little louder. As the line goes down, you get a little softer. Now, that kind of changes a bit on saxophone because when you play those really low notes, B flat, B, C, you're going to have to kind of push a little more to support them. So it's kind of like the very bottom notes are kind of loud, and then they get softer, and then loud, and then down. So it's not an exact thing. But what I want you not to do is have certain notes pop out way louder than other notes. For example, you don't want to hear this. Right, obviously. So try to really even out the sound. That gets hard, especially when you have to jump down. Every time you do the inversion, you go up one octave and then you jump down. In this case, I'm jumping from B flat down to D. You're going to have to adjust with your embouchure, your air to support enough to have that lower note speak without it being super bright, super loud compared to the notes around it. Go slow. Going slower will really help you with this. I recommend also using a metronome throughout, but time in this exercise is secondary, okay? Tone and intonation, evenness of volume, evenness of intonation, all that stuff is more important than the time. This is not necessarily a technique exercise. You can turn it into one, right? You could, do something like 1 and 2 and see how perfect you can play it in time. That's something you could do as well, but I'm using this as a tone and intonation exercise. The final thing I want you to think about when doing this exercise is your articulation. There are certain articulations that are going to make this exercise easier and some that are going to make it much harder. When you first start out doing this exercise, I recommend just tonguing every single note. Ta, 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 ta. Connect the notes with like a da tongue. So it's not ta, 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 but I would tongue every single note. That's going to give you the best chance to have each note speak. And it's also going to train you when you're articulating to stay in tune. A lot of people, when they first tongue a note, they start sharp. They go, ya, ya. They do something like this. I'm over-exaggerating it, of course, but because they're tonguing, they're squeezing and then releasing their tongue down for the note, and it's so overdone, and they're biting so much that it starts sharp in tune, sharp in tune, sharp in tune. So you want to focus on just articulating each note, have each note speak clearly, connect them, but make sure, once again, you're using that tuner. The next articulation I think would be cool for you to do is where you tongue the beginning of each of the 4-note groupings. So you would tongue through position the first note, da, and then slur into the rest. Then when you jump down, you tongue. So that would sound like this. You understand? When you jump down, it's much easier to start that lower note with the tongue because, as you're going to see in a second when we try to slur it, it's much harder when you're skipping that far to slur it. But because you're slurring those notes going up and then you're slurring the beginning of those notes coming down, it's going to have you work on your air, supporting enough air, and moving your fingers properly and adjusting your embouchure quick enough to stay perfectly in tune. When you tongue notes, it kind of gives your embouchure a millisecond to reset, ta, ta, so you can feel it, which is easier, that's why I want you to start tonguing every note. When you start slurring these notes, tongue 1, slur the next 3, tongue 1, slur the next 3. Now you're going to have to move during the slurred notes instantly with your embouchure because there's nothing interrupting the note. It's just your fingers moving. And then as your fingers move, in that split second, your embouchure has to adjust. And what do I mean by embouchure adjusting? Once again, go back to last week's video. That's all about long tones and how to actually use them. And I talk about the E-all thing. By the way, that was January 12th. 2024, if you're not watching this right on the 19th when this video is coming out. The final articulation to do is slur everything. So obviously we'll tongue the very first note, but after that, you're going to slur everything all the way up and then all the way back down. If you have enough air to go up and down, great. If not, like the first time I did it because I was going slow, I just paused at the top, come back down. But slurring every note now, you're going to find is really difficult because you're going to have to do that jump down to reset for each of the 4 notes. It's really tricky, but if you can get to this point, that's where you want to be. So I'm going to demonstrate doing that now, slurring everything. That one there where you slur every single note is pretty tricky because, like I said, you're worried about the embouchure moving and doing all that. But if you really focus and you're trying to play it perfectly in time, with each note being perfectly in tune, and focus on the articulation, focus on moving your embouchure perfectly and staying nice and still when you play. If you noticed, I was like a statue there. You're going to have that ultimate focus and control over your tone and your intonation. People talk about having a good tone. Well, it's also about controlling that tone. Because if one note out of 20-something notes on your instrument are in tune or sound good, you don't really have a good sound. Even if most of the notes sound good, if you can't control it and manipulate it in the way that works best for you, it's kind of useless in my opinion. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching and thanks for your support. Although this exercise that I showed you is pretty simple, it will absolutely improve your sound if you go through it and focus on it the way I showed you. If there are any other techniques you'd like help with, please let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to grab the PDF worksheet that goes along with this lesson, and I'll see you in the next video.